The courtroom was filled with the buzz of chatter, the clinking of coffee cups, and the rustle of papers. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if something big was about to unfold. Everyone knew that the case at hand was no ordinary lawsuit. This was Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator, the man who had reshaped industries and changed the world. Today, he stood before the judge in a tense legal battle that could change the course of his life. The judge, an older man with a reputation for sharp wit and a sharp tongue, leaned back in his chair. He glanced around the room, then looked at Musk, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Well, the judge began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Elon Musk, the man who thinks he can conquer the world. Tell me, Mr. Musk, what makes you think you can walk in here and get away with this? A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom. It wasn't cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from a deep-seated amusement at the eccentricity of the man standing before them. Musk, unfazed, adjusted his suit and gazed steadily at the judge, his usual confidence unwavering. Musk had always been a figure of intrigue. Some admired his audacity, his refusal to conform to the norms of business and society. Others, like the judge, found his larger-than-life persona amusing. Musk was no stranger to being the subject of mockery, but this time, the stakes were much higher. As the judge's words echoed in the room, Musk's mind was elsewhere. The case that had brought him here today was a matter of personal and professional importance. It wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a direct attack on everything he had worked for, everything he had built. The past year had been a whirlwind of setbacks, from technical failures at SpaceX to financial struggles at Tesla, and now, this legal battle threatened to undo all of his progress. The room went quiet when Musk finally spoke. "I didn't come here to make jokes or entertain anyone," he said, his voice calm but with an underlying firmness. "I'm here to make sure the truth is heard." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by Musk's unflappable demeanor. "The truth? The truth, Mr. Musk, is that you've got more money than God, and yet here you are, facing charges for actions that could topple your empire. How's that for irony?" More laughter rippled through the courtroom, but Musk stood his ground, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. He wasn't afraid of the public mockery. In fact, he had been ridiculed far worse in the past. But this time, there was something different. This time, it wasn't just about the future of his companies. It was about his legacy. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's words, though seemingly casual, held a deeper meaning. He had faced challenges before, mountains of doubt and disbelief from every corner of the world. But he never stopped. He never let the laughter, the doubts, or the insults deter him from his path. Behind the confident exterior, Musk was battling with something far more complicated than just a lawsuit. His past had come back to haunt him in ways he never anticipated. The judge's laughter, the mocking tone, it all masked a deeper truth that was slowly beginning to unravel. As Musk glanced around the courtroom, his thoughts briefly flickered to his humble beginnings. He had always known that he wasn't meant for an ordinary life. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had faced a childhood filled with hardship. His parents were divorced, and he was often the target of bullying. But from a young age, he had a drive to escape that world, to do something that mattered. The moment he discovered computers, something clicked. His world became about code, engineering, and solving problems. Musk was not just a dreamer, he was a doer. That drive had taken him from South Africa to Canada, then to the United States, where he would eventually become one of the most well-known entrepreneurs in history. He had built PayPal, launched SpaceX, and made Tesla a household name. But there were also the failures, the moments when the world had written him off as a madman. There were times when he had questioned everything, when it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Musk's relationship with his family had always been complicated. His father, a man of few words, had never been one to offer encouragement. Musk's mother, on the other hand, had always supported him, though she never fully understood his obsession with technology. But it was the bond with his siblings, particularly his brother Kimball, that had kept him grounded through the years. It wasn't just the ridicule from the judge that made this moment so tense. It was the realization that his enemies were finally getting their shot. The people who had tried to bring him down, who had doubted his every move, were now standing in his way once again. This lawsuit wasn't just about business, it was personal. As the judge continued his banter, Musk's thoughts drifted to the days before all of this, to the moments when he had made the decisions that had led him to this point. There was no going back now. The judge leaned forward, his tone turning more serious. "I'll tell you what, Mr. Musk. You might have the world's attention, but the real question is, what do you plan to do about it?" Musk met the judge's gaze, his voice steady. "I plan to fight. I've fought for everything I've achieved, and I'm not about to stop now." There was a moment of silence, and for the first time that day, the courtroom was still. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago faded into the background. The weight of Musk's words lingered in the air, and the audience could sense that this was no ordinary case. This was a battle for the future of a man who had changed the world, and who wasn't about to let anything or anyone stop him now. But as Musk prepared to take the next step in this fight, a sudden realization struck him. There was something more at play here, something deeper than just this lawsuit. The case was about to take an unexpected turn, and soon, the world would find out just how far Musk was willing to go to protect everything he had built. The tension in the room was palpable. What Musk didn't know was that this case wasn't just about his businesses or his reputation. It was about to reveal a secret so powerful, it would change everything. But for now, he could only wait. Elon Musk sat in the courtroom, surrounded by a sea of faces. The laughter had faded, but the tension in the air was palpable. As the judge leaned back, clearly enjoying the dramatic moment he had created, Musk's thoughts drifted away from the present to a time long before his empire, before the billions, and before the public persona that seemed larger than life. He thought back to his childhood in Pretoria, South Africa. He was the quiet kid, often lost in his books or playing with electronics. His parents had separated when he was young, and the strain between them never really eased. His father, Elon Musk, was a man of few words and even fewer compliments. Errol's cold, distant nature left Elon searching for approval in all the wrong places, while his mother, May, tried to provide him with love and support. May had always been there for him, even when she didn't understand his intense obsession with technology and innovation. It wasn't until Elon was around 10 years old that he found solace in computers. He had always been an outcast, the nerdy kid who didn't fit in. He wasn't a typical South African child, with a deep love for sports or socializing. Instead, he found his escape in books and computer programming. When his mother got him a Commodore VIC-20, a personal computer, his life changed forever. He taught himself how to code, creating simple games in BASIC, and quickly fell in love with the idea that he could create something out of nothing, an idea that would stick with him for the rest of his life. Despite the rocky home life, Musk's passion for technology only grew stronger. His academic achievements were impressive, but they didn't quite matter to the people around him. They saw him as eccentric, someone who would never amount to much. His peers, too, ridiculed him for being different. But Elon's mind didn't focus on what others thought. It was always about the future, always about the next big thing. By the time he reached high school, Elon had moved to Canada to live with his mother. He had spent countless nights reading about the greats, people like Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and the Wright brothers, who had changed the world with their inventions. And that's when it hit him. He could do the same. He wasn't going to settle for just another life. He wanted to change humanity's trajectory, push the limits of technology, and perhaps even travel to Mars. But before all of that, Musk faced the daunting task of leaving Canada and moving to the United States to attend the University of Pennsylvania. A fresh start in a new country with the hope of a brighter future. Musk worked hard, earning degrees in both physics and economics, driven by a vision that seemed impossible to many. His mind, however, was set. Musk wasn't interested in making money just for the sake of it. He wanted to change the world. It was that vision that fueled him during his time at university and later when he dropped out of Stanford after just 2 days to pursue his dreams. His first major success came with Zip2, a software company he founded with his brother Kimball. It was a simple idea, an online city guide, but it would prove to be the beginning of something huge. Compaq's acquisition of Zip2 for $307 million in 1999 gave Musk the financial freedom to pursue other ventures. But while Zip2 was his first taste of success, it was nothing compared to what was coming next. After Zip2, Musk co-founded X.com, an online payment company, which later became PayPal. The road to PayPal's success wasn't easy, and Musk faced numerous challenges. He had the drive and the vision, but the company's internal politics often got in the way. Eventually, Musk was ousted from his own company, and it was his successor, Peter Thiel, who helped turn PayPal into a dominant force in online payments. But Musk wasn't deterred. PayPal's eventual acquisition by eBay for $1.5 billion was another win. But Musk wasn't content to rest on his laurels. Musk's next ventures would cement his place as one of the most influential innovators of his generation. With the proceeds from PayPal, he founded SpaceX, with the aim of making space travel more affordable and, ultimately, enabling humanity to live on other planets. It seemed like a far-fetched dream, one that many people scoffed at. After all, NASA had been struggling for decades to make space travel viable, and the idea of a private company taking on such a massive challenge seemed absurd. But Musk was never one to back down from absurd ideas. He poured his wealth into SpaceX, determined to make it work. The early years were filled with failures, failed rocket launches, near bankruptcies, and growing skepticism from critics. But Musk refused to give up. Each failure only fueled his determination. Finally, in 2008, SpaceX succeeded in launching the Falcon 9 rocket, making it the first privately funded company to reach space. From that moment on, Musk was no longer just a successful entrepreneur, he was a pioneer. But Musk's journey was far from over. As SpaceX began to gain momentum, he turned his attention to Tesla, a company focused on electric vehicles. The automotive industry had been slow to embrace electric cars, and many people believed that Musk was chasing a pipe dream. But he knew that climate change was a real threat, and he was determined to be part of the solution. Tesla's early days were rocky, and many predicted its failure. But once again, Musk's persistence paid off. Tesla's Model S, released in 2012, revolutionized the electric car market and catapulted Tesla into the mainstream. By 2020, Musk's net worth had skyrocketed, and Tesla had become one of the most valuable companies in the world. But behind the success, Musk had faced many personal and professional struggles. His relationships had been strained, especially with his first wife, Justine Musk, with whom he had 5 children. His second marriage to actress Tallulah Riley was equally tumultuous. Musk's obsession with his work often came at the expense of his personal life, and he had struggled with loneliness, mental health, and the weight of his own ambition. And now, as he stood in the courtroom, facing a lawsuit that threatened everything he had worked for, Musk couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. The laughter from the judge, the mockery from the opposing lawyers, it all seemed so trivial in comparison to the enormous responsibility Musk had taken on over the years. He had gambled everything, his money, his reputation, and his future, all for the chance to make a difference. But there was something more at play here. The case wasn't just about money or legal battles. It was about Musk's place in the world, his legacy, and that was something no courtroom could decide. As the judge continued to make sarcastic comments, Musk's eyes narrowed. This battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. He had fought too hard, faced too many obstacles, and defied too many odds to back down now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's voice, calm yet resolute, rang out through the courtroom, and for the first time that day, the judge paused, his smirk fading into a thoughtful expression. The tension in the courtroom was thick, and it wasn't just the weight of the case that made the air feel so heavy. Elon Musk could sense it, a subtle shift that everyone in the room could feel. The judge, who had been so quick with his sarcastic remarks, now had a contemplative look on his face. His earlier laughter faded, and in its place, there was an undeniable respect. But for Musk, that moment of quiet wasn't enough to settle his nerves. He had seen enough to know that this battle was far from over. Musk's mind raced as he thought about the events that had brought him here, to this courtroom. The lawsuit, which seemed trivial at first, had spiraled into something more insidious. What began as a business dispute over a failing contract with a rival tech giant had turned into an all-out assault on his character, his integrity, and his company's. The accusations ranged from fraudulent financial practices to deceptive marketing tactics. But the truth was, Musk knew exactly what was going on. This wasn't just about a bad contract. This was personal. He had made a lot of enemies in his time. Competitors, disgruntled employees, even former partners. And it wasn't hard to see who was behind the lawsuit. It wasn't just about money. It was about Musk's vision, his ambition to push humanity to the stars, his relentless drive to change the world. Mr. Musk, please respond. The judge's voice cut through the tension, pulling Musk from his thoughts. The entire room had fallen silent, awaiting his reply. Musk took a deep breath and stood. He knew what he had to say. The truth. He had nothing to hide. "I'll say this plainly," Musk began, his voice steady and commanding. "The accusations against me and my companies are baseless. This lawsuit is an attack, not just on my businesses, but on everything I stand for. The people behind this want to see me fail, but I'm not going to let that happen." The judge raised an eyebrow, and a murmur ran through the courtroom. Musk's confidence was undeniable, but there was something more in his words, something that no one in the room had expected. The case had quickly gone from a legal dispute to a question of Musk's very identity. "You claim this is personal," the judge said slowly, looking at Musk with a scrutinizing gaze. "And you're right. It is personal. You've made a lot of enemies over the years. People who feel threatened by your success. People who think you're playing too big of a game. But, Mr. Musk, if this was just about business, it would be over already. Why do you think people are still after you, after all these years?" Musk was silent for a moment, his thoughts spinning. He had asked himself the same question countless times. Why him? Why did it feel like the universe itself was conspiring against him? He had built his companies from the ground up, fought through countless failures, and reached the heights of success, but it never seemed to be enough. There was always someone, somewhere, trying to tear him down. "I'm not afraid of people who want to tear me down," Musk finally said, his voice resolute, "because I know that this, all of this, is about something far bigger than any lawsuit or financial loss. It's about changing the world. It's about the future, and no one can stop that." The courtroom was quiet, each person digesting his words. The judge didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at his notes, a thoughtful expression on his face. For the first time, there was no sarcastic retort, no more jabs, only a palpable silence. But even as Musk spoke with such confidence, he knew that there was something more to this case. He could feel the heat of the battle rising, and it wasn't just coming from the opposing lawyers. It was coming from the shadows of his past, the mistakes and missteps that he had buried deep beneath the surface. There were things in Musk's past that no one knew about, things he had tried to forget, things he had tried to cover up. He had made plenty of mistakes along the way, and some of those mistakes had cost him more than money. They had cost him relationships. They had cost him trust. And now, those skeletons were coming back to haunt him. He thought about the countless times he had pushed people away for the sake of his work, the failed relationships, the divorces, the strained friendships. There was a part of Musk that had always believed he was invincible, that nothing could stand in his way. But now, as the stakes grew higher, he realized that perhaps, just perhaps, there were things even he couldn't control. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not after everything he had fought for. The opposition had already made their move, launching a smear campaign that painted Musk as a reckless billionaire, driven only by his own ego and ambition. They accused him of exploiting his employees, of cutting corners, and of bending the rules to suit his vision. But Musk knew better than anyone that change didn't come from following the rules. It came from breaking them. It came from defying the odds, from thinking bigger than anyone thought possible. There was a reason why people called him a madman, a genius, a visionary. All of those labels fit, but they didn't tell the full story. What people didn't see was the darkness that had followed him throughout his career. The moments of doubt, the loneliness, the sleepless nights spent wondering if it was all worth it. Musk had sacrificed so much for his companies, and now it seemed like those sacrifices were about to come back to bite him. But the real danger was the sense of betrayal. The people who had once been by his side, trusted allies who had helped him build his empire, were now turning on him. He could feel the whispers, the rumors, the subtle shifts in loyalty. Everyone had their own agenda, and that made Musk's job even harder. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice cutting through the tension once again, "this isn't about some petty legal battle. It's about whether or not we, as a species, are willing to look beyond the horizon and push the boundaries of what we know. Whether or not we have the courage to fail, to fall, and to rise again. You can ridicule me all you want, but you can't stop what's coming. The future is inevitable." The judge studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Musk could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if anyone in the room truly understood what he was trying to say. The judge finally nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that, Mr. Musk. We'll see." The morning sun pierced through the tall windows of the courtroom, casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. But inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The case had become more than just a legal dispute. It was now a battle for Musk's future, a battle that would define everything he had worked for. Musk's mind raced as the proceedings continued. He'd always known that his path to success was never going to be easy. He had faced countless obstacles, taken risks that others thought were insane, and fought battles that seemed unwinnable. But this was different. This wasn't just about building a company or taking a new idea to market. This was about his legacy. It was about the future of humanity. As the judge banged his gavel and called for a recess, Musk stood up and walked out of the courtroom, his thoughts swirling in a storm of doubt and determination. He needed to clear his mind. He needed to think, to plan his next move. This wasn't just about defending his companies. It was about proving to the world that what he was doing was worth it. He couldn't back down now, not when so much was at stake. Outside, the cold air hit Musk's face as he stepped into the quiet streets. His bodyguards flanked him on either side, their eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. It was strange, Musk thought, how life had changed. Just a few years ago, he was a man on a mission, launching rockets, revolutionizing the car industry, and changing the world with a single tweet. But now, he was in the fight of his life, and for the first time, he felt truly vulnerable. He had always been able to control his destiny, to push forward and make things happen. But now, the forces against him felt too powerful. The legal team that had been assembled to take him down was relentless. And the media, once his ally, now painted him as a villain. The stories were everywhere. Musk's empire is crumbling, the fall of a tech titan, billionaires' greed threatens the future of space travel. But Musk knew better than anyone that public opinion could be swayed. He had seen it happen before. The same people who mocked him for his ambitions to go to Mars were now calling him a visionary. He had risen from the ashes time and time again, and this time would be no different. He couldn't afford to dwell on his doubts. He had made it this far by focusing on the bigger picture, and that's what he needed to do now. The world didn't care about the small setbacks. It cared about the big ideas, the things that would change the course of history. He had to keep his eye on the prize. Mars, sustainability, electric cars, and so much more. As he made his way to the parking garage, Musk's mind wandered back to his roots, to the early days of SpaceX. It had been a gamble, a huge one. Many had thought he was crazy to try and launch rockets when NASA was struggling. The first few launches had ended in failure, spectacular failure, with millions of dollars lost and countless hours of work down the drain. But Musk had never been afraid of failure. It was a necessary step in the process, a lesson in humility. And each failure brought him closer to success. He thought back to the first successful launch of the Falcon 1. It had been a moment of triumph, but Musk had known it was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. There would be more setbacks, more failures. But he also knew that if he kept pushing forward, the breakthrough would come. And it did. SpaceX had gone on to achieve things that no one thought possible. The Falcon 9, the first reusable rocket, revolutionized space travel. The Dragon spacecraft, which now regularly delivered cargo to the International Space Station, had once been a pipe dream. And the Starship project, which aimed to take humans to Mars, was closer to reality than ever before. But even as SpaceX reached new heights, Musk faced constant criticism. People told him it was too risky, too expensive, too ambitious, but he didn't care. He had always believed that big problems required big solutions. If humanity was ever going to survive long-term, it couldn't just be confined to one planet. Space exploration wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. And now, as he stood in the middle of a legal battle that threatened to undo everything he had built, Musk's resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let this lawsuit stop him. It was just another obstacle on his path, another test of his will. He had been to the edge before, and each time, he had come back stronger. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from Kimball, his brother. "Call me ASAP," it said. Musk's heart skipped a beat. Kimball was one of the few people in his life who he trusted implicitly. They had been through so much together, both the highs and the lows. Elon quickly dialed Kimball's number, his mind racing as he wondered what the message was about. "Hey bro," Kimball's voice came through the phone. "I just wanted to check in. How's everything going with the case?" Musk leaned against the side of the car, looking out at the city. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. "It's getting worse," he admitted. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Kimball's voice was calm but firm. "You can do this. You've fought through worse. Remember what you've always said, failure isn't an option. You've built this empire, and you're not going to let anyone take it down now." Musk closed his eyes for a moment, letting his brother's words sink in. He had heard them before, countless times. Kimball had always been his rock, the person who kept him grounded when everything else seemed to be spinning out of control. But this time, the stakes were higher. This time, it wasn't just about business. It was about the future of humanity. "I know, Kimball," Musk said, his voice quieter now, "but it feels like everything is falling apart. The media is turning against me. The legal team is relentless. People are starting to question everything I've done." Kimball's response was simple but powerful. "You've always been the underdog, Elon, but you always win. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget what you're fighting for." Musk felt a surge of determination flood through him. His brother was right. This wasn't just about him. This was about the future, and he wasn't about to let anyone stand in the way of that. "Thanks, Kimball," Musk said, his voice filled with renewed strength. "I needed that." As he hung up, he looked up at the towering buildings around him, the city bustling with life. It was strange to think that just a few short years ago, he had been one of the unknowns, an eccentric entrepreneur with big ideas and no guarantee of success. Now, he was a symbol of innovation, of progress. But that didn't mean the road ahead was easy. It never had been. With a deep breath, Musk climbed into his car. It was time to get back to the fight. The days following the recess were a blur of strategy sessions, media interviews, and sleepless nights. Musk's team had been working around the clock, assembling every piece of evidence and testimony they could find to counter the allegations that were threatening to unravel his empire. He spent hours on the phone with lawyers, tech experts, and advisors, making sure every angle was covered. But no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on him. The courtroom had become a battleground, not just for the future of his companies, but for his very identity. Each argument from the opposing side felt like a direct assault on everything Musk had built. The accusations, although unfounded, were being weaponized against him with such precision that even his staunchest supporters were starting to question the narrative. As the case reached its boiling point, Musk found himself facing his toughest moment yet. It all came to a head in the middle of one particularly tense day. The opposing lawyer had just finished laying out a lengthy argument accusing Musk of prioritizing profit over ethics, painting him as a billionaire driven only by ego and self-interest. Musk was used to the media's portrayal of him as a mad scientist with a penchant for over-the-top stunts, but hearing it in the courtroom, framed by such deliberate hostility, hit him harder than he had expected. "Mr. Musk," the opposing lawyer said, his voice dripping with disdain, "you claim to be a visionary, a genius, a pioneer. But all the world has seen are your failures. Your attempts to reach Mars, your electric cars that are still out of reach for most people, your businesses that seem to teeter on the edge of collapse. Are you really the man to be trusted with the future? The words hung in the air like a dagger, and for a moment, Musk was silent. He could feel his heart rate spike, his palms beginning to sweat as he fought to maintain control. His mind screamed for him to retaliate, to defend himself with everything he had. But something inside him told him to wait. He had been through worse before, and he knew that the right response would come, but only if he could stay calm. He took a deep breath, looking around the courtroom at the sea of faces. He could feel the weight of their expectations, the pressure to perform, to prove them all wrong. He thought back to the long nights in the early days of SpaceX, when he and his team had put everything they had into making the impossible possible. It had taken everything: time, money, patience, and an unrelenting belief in something bigger than themselves. And now, here he was, standing on the precipice of everything he had worked for, and in that moment, it felt like the entire world was watching. He couldn't afford to break. Not now. Finally, Musk stood. His gaze locked onto the opposing lawyers. "You're right," Musk said, his voice steady. "I'm not perfect. I've failed more times than I can count. I've taken risks that no one else would dare. And I've made mistakes. But that's the price of trying to change the world. You don't get to play it safe and expect a revolution. And you certainly don't get to sit in judgment of me, of what I've done, without understanding the stakes." The courtroom was silent. The judge looked up, intrigued. The opposing lawyer had no immediate retort. "Do you think I've done all of this for the money?" Musk continued, his voice rising slightly now, filled with conviction. "I've made billions, yes, but I've also lost billions. The money is secondary. The mission, the future, that's what matters. I don't just want to send rockets to space. I want to ensure that humanity has a chance to survive in the future. We are facing challenges that will determine whether or not we survive as a species. Climate change, resource depletion, overpopulation. These are not problems for the next generation. They are problems we need to solve now." Musk paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. He could feel the eyes of the room on him, the weight of his message hanging heavy in the air. The way we power our world, the way we explore the stars. It all starts with big ideas, and big ideas come with risks. If you think you can change the world without stepping into the unknown, then you're not really trying to change anything at all. The opposing lawyer's mouth was slightly ajar, taken aback by Musk's unexpected clarity. Even the judge, who had been quietly skeptical throughout the proceedings, looked at Musk with a hint of respect. But the damage had already been done. The seeds of doubt had been planted. The courtroom wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It was about who would control the future narrative. Musk could feel his pulse quickening. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. He had said his piece, but there was still one thing left to do. "Your Honor," Musk said, turning toward the judge, "you're right to question the consequences of my actions. But you must also understand the consequences of inaction. We can't afford to waste time. The world is changing, and the people who have the courage to lead us into that future are the ones who will be remembered." The courtroom fell into complete silence. Musk could feel his words hanging in the air, resonating with an intensity he hadn't expected. And in that silence, he knew that things were about to change. The case was no longer about who had the better legal argument or the more persuasive evidence. It was about vision. It was about the future. And Musk was ready to fight for it. The judge took a deep breath and adjusted his glasses, the weight of Musk's words clearly sinking in. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice measured but slightly softened, "you've made your position clear. This court will take a brief recess to consider your statements." As the room erupted into murmurs, Musk allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in days, he felt like he had taken control of the narrative. The fight had just begun. The courtroom was silent, a heavy stillness hanging in the air as the judge called for a brief recess. Musk stood still, his thoughts rushing, his heart still pounding from the intensity of his words. His chest rose and fell with each breath as he tried to regain some semblance of control. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But something had changed in that moment. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of clarity. A sense of purpose that had been clouded by the relentless pressure of the lawsuit and the media's constant scrutiny. In the chaos of his empire, he had almost forgotten why he started this journey in the first place. It was about more than just business, more than just tech and innovation. It was about building something that would endure beyond his lifetime. About creating a legacy that would truly change the course of humanity. The recess felt like an eternity as Musk walked out of the courtroom, his mind still racing. He needed to speak to someone, to ground himself in the reality of what he had just done. He pulled out his phone and called Kimball. "Hey bro, what's going on?" Kimball's voice crackled through the line. Musk rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. "It's happening, Kimball. I just told them the truth. I don't care what they think of me anymore. I have to fight for what's right." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Kimball spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Elon, that's the man I know. The one who doesn't back down. The one who believes in the future, no matter how hard it gets." Musk smiled, a rare, genuine smile, feeling the connection to his brother. Kimball had always been his anchor, the one who reminded him of his purpose when the world was trying to pull him in a million different directions. "I just needed to hear that," Musk said quietly, leaning back against the wall outside the courtroom. "Sometimes, I get so caught up in the chaos that I forget why I'm doing this." "You're doing it for something bigger than yourself, man," Kimball replied, his words carrying the weight of truth. "You're doing it for everyone." Musk nodded, even though Kimball couldn't see him. For a moment, he felt like he could breathe again. The tension in his shoulders began to ease. "Thanks, Kimball," Musk said, his voice quieter now, more reflective. "I just hope it's enough." "I know it is," Kimball reassured him. "Just keep doing what you've always done. Lead by example." As Musk ended the call, he stood there, taking in the city around him. The hustle, the noise, the constant movement. Everything had always felt like a race, a never-ending cycle of progress and setbacks. But now, for the first time in a long time, Musk saw it all with new eyes. He thought about the road ahead, the challenges he would face, the obstacles that would come. The media would continue to twist the story. The lawsuits would keep coming. But none of it would change his mission. He had come too far. He had built too much. And he had a vision for the future of humanity that would not be derailed by the noise of the present. As he walked back toward the courthouse, Musk's mind wandered to the early days of SpaceX. He remembered the desperation in those first years, the feeling of uncertainty that plagued him every time a launch failed, the doubts that crept in when investors pulled out or when engineers couldn't get the rockets to work. But each failure had only fueled his determination. Each setback had been a lesson, not a defeat. And now, looking back on everything he had accomplished, Musk realized that the most important lessons weren't about technology or business. They were about resilience. About pushing forward when the world told you to stop. About fighting for what you believe in, even when it seemed impossible. The recess ended, and the courtroom filled with people again. Musk walked back inside, his shoulders squared, his mind sharp. It was time for the final stretch. He was ready for whatever the next chapter would bring. The judge called the room to order, and the proceedings continued. But there was a noticeable shift. The energy in the room had changed. The opposing lawyer's tone was less sure now. The skeptical glances from the courtroom audience had softened. Musk had found his voice, and the power of his words hung in the air, shifting the atmosphere. It wasn't about winning the case anymore. It was about more than that. It was about proving that progress, even when difficult, was always worth fighting for. The opposing side presented their closing arguments, but Musk no longer felt the weight of their accusations. He stood tall, unwavering, listening to their words as though they were nothing more than noise. He had already won the battle in his heart and mind. When it was his turn, Musk stood again, calm but resolute. "Your Honor," he began, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "I've always believed that our greatest achievements come from the most difficult challenges. This case isn't about me. It's about the future we are all trying to create. It's about the generations that will follow us and the choices we make today that will shape their world. I stand here not just as a businessman, but as someone who is dedicated to solving the world's biggest problems, no matter how insurmountable they may seem. He looked directly at the judge. I've never backed down from a challenge in my life, and I'm not backing down now. The judge nodded slowly, clearly moved by Musk's words. There was no immediate verdict, but it was clear that the courtroom had heard Musk's message loud and clear. It was no longer about whether or not Musk would lose the case. It was about what kind of world he was trying to build. The days that followed were filled with anticipation, but the outcome of the case didn't matter as much anymore. Musk had found something far more valuable than victory. He had rediscovered his sense of purpose, and that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. The days that followed the emotional climax of Musk's impassioned speech felt like a fog. Time moved slowly, each moment suspended in the air as Musk waited, anxiously but with a growing sense of anticipation. His mind had been preoccupied with the case, but now, with the final arguments behind him, he couldn't help but think of the future he had always been so determined to build. His team had rallied behind him, and despite the pressure of the trial, they had become more united than ever. The weight of their support had provided Musk with a strange sense of comfort. The battle in the courtroom had been intense, but he could feel the resilience of his people, their unwavering belief in his vision. They had all known that this case was more than a legal matter. It was about the direction of his companies, his legacy, and, most importantly, the future of humanity. The waiting game had begun. Each day, Musk spent hours at his office, juggling countless calls, business strategies, and new ideas. But there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. As much as he had laid everything on the line, as much as he had told the world that he was fighting for something greater, he knew that the decision was now out of his hands. The judge would decide his fate, and that felt like a strange, hollow thing to accept. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day arrived. Musk stood in the courtroom, flanked by his team, his usual confidence replaced with a tense silence. He could feel the weight of every gaze on him as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. It was as though the entire room held its collective breath, waiting for the decision that would either solidify his future or leave him with nothing. The judge, a stern man with decades of legal experience, glanced down at the papers in front of him before looking up at the room. His face was unreadable, a mask of impartiality, but Musk could sense the gravity of the moment. The air was thick with tension, and every second stretched into an eternity. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, his voice calm yet firm, "after careful consideration of the arguments presented in this case, I have come to a conclusion." Musk's heart raced in his chest. His palms began to sweat, and he felt a sudden weight on his shoulders as though the room itself had grown heavier. He had done everything he could to make his case, to fight for what he believed was right. But now, it was time to hear the decision that would determine everything. "The court has determined that the charges against Mr. Musk are not supported by sufficient evidence," the judge continued. "While it is clear that there have been missteps in the handling of certain situations, the accusations of malfeasance do not meet the burden of proof required for this case. As such, the court rules in favor of the defendant, Mr. Musk." For a split second, Musk couldn't process the words. It was as though time had stopped. The noise of the courtroom, the murmurs, the shifting of feet, the quiet rustling of papers, all faded away. His mind was clouded with disbelief. Was it really over? Had he truly won? The reality hit him slowly. A smile crept across his face, but it was subtle, more of a weight lifting off his shoulders than a celebration of victory. He had done it. He had won the case. But it wasn't just the victory itself that overwhelmed him. It was the understanding of what this meant, the implications for his companies, for his vision, for the future of space exploration, and for the millions of people who believed in his mission. It all hinged on this moment. He turned to his team, and their faces mirrored his own shock and relief. There were smiles, hugs, and congratulations. But there was something more in the air, something deeper. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a reminder of why they had fought so hard in the first place. The future was still within reach. As the courtroom began to empty, Musk stayed behind, standing by himself for a moment. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, gratitude for his team, for his family, for everyone who had stood by him through the trials and tribulations. But most of all, he felt gratitude for himself, for not giving up. There had been moments when he had doubted everything. The relentless pressure of the case had taken its toll. There had been times when he had questioned whether it was all worth it. But now, as he stood in that courtroom, he realized something. It was never about the case. It was about the fight for a future that was bigger than any one person or company. Musk walked out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. He could feel the weight of the past weeks lifting off of him, but he knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but now he had a renewed sense of purpose. As he entered the car waiting for him outside, he took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment of reflection. The world was changing, and he would continue to fight for that future, no matter what. The victory in court had been important, but it was the future that mattered most. And as the car drove away, Musk looked out the window, already thinking about the next challenge, the next breakthrough, the next step toward a future that no one had yet dared to imagine. The following weeks felt like a blur to Elon Musk. The verdict had come down in his favor, but the aftermath was far from simple. It wasn't just about winning the lawsuit. It was about rebuilding his public image, strengthening the companies that were at the heart of his mission, and reestablishing trust with those who had questioned his every move. Even though the courtroom battle was over, the pressure hadn't relented. If anything, the expectations on him had only grown. Musk knew he couldn't afford to rest. This was just another chapter in the long journey, one with new hurdles that would require all his strength, focus, and resilience. But as he stood on the rooftop of his Tesla building, looking out over the sprawling city of Palo Alto, he couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet triumph. The world below seemed to hum with possibility, a landscape brimming with both the potential for innovation and the inevitability of challenges. And Elon Musk was right in the thick of it, navigating both. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Kimball. "You did it, bro. I knew you would. But now, the real work begins." Elon smiled at the message, feeling the weight of Kimball's words sink in. It was true. The victory had been monumental, but there was more to be done. His mission had always been clear: to revolutionize space travel, to advance sustainable energy, and to build technologies that would lead humanity into the future. None of that was accomplished by lawsuits or courtrooms. The real work was always about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He tapped out a quick response. "The real work never ends. Let's keep building, Kimball." A few minutes later, his phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call. It was from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president. He quickly answered. "Hey, Gwynne. What's up?" "Elon." Gwynne's voice was upbeat, but tinged with seriousness. "I just got off a call with the team. We're looking at launching a new mission, but we've hit a few snags with the rocket design. We need to make some adjustments, or it could delay the timeline." Musk listened intently, his mind already shifting to work mode. There was always something. Always a new problem to solve, a new challenge to face. But he thrived on that. It was the problem-solving, the constant iteration and innovation that kept him engaged. "Give me a full breakdown," he replied. "I'll come down to the facility tomorrow, and we'll figure it out." The conversation shifted quickly to specifics, and Musk found himself mentally sketching out solutions as Gwynne outlined the obstacles. They discussed everything from material testing to propulsion issues, all of which felt like typical bumps in the road. SpaceX's goal of making life multiplanetary had always been a monumental task, and setbacks were inevitable. But Musk wasn't the kind of person who allowed obstacles to define him. After hanging up, he stood for a moment, taking in the view once again. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was the perfect moment to reflect on how far he'd come, but also to consider the challenges that still lay ahead. Musk wasn't done yet. The victory in court had been a brief respite from the storm, but it wasn't the end of the story. There was still Mars to reach, and Earth needed sustainable solutions just as desperately as ever. Tesla was still working toward full autonomy for its vehicles, SpaceX was preparing for its next big launch, and Neuralink was pushing the boundaries of the human mind. The work, it seemed, would never stop. That night, as Musk lay in bed, He felt the familiar feeling of uncertainty creep in. Was he doing enough? Was he really making a difference? The voices of doubt would always be there, but he had learned to silence them over the years. The key was to stay focused on the long-term vision, to see the future not as a distant dream, but as something that was actively taking shape. Sleep eventually found him, but it was a restless kind of sleep. His dreams were filled with images of rockets soaring into the sky, of cars whizzing through city streets, of solar panels covering every roof. In his dreams, he was building a world that could sustain life long after humanity had left Earth behind. The next morning, Musk arrived at SpaceX's headquarters early, determined to dive into the problems at hand. The team had gathered in the conference room, and the mood was a mix of concern and determination. They all knew how important the upcoming launch was, not just for SpaceX but for the entire aerospace industry. It was a step closer to the dream of making space travel routine, of sending humans to Mars. As Musk sat down at the head of the table, the engineers began to present their findings. The issues they faced were significant, but not insurmountable. Musk could feel the pressure mounting, but he remained focused. They had solved problems before, and they would solve them again. Over the course of the next few hours, the team brainstormed ideas, revising the designs, testing materials, and working through every possible angle. Musk's mind was sharp, his instincts guiding the conversation as he pushed the team to think bigger, think bolder. There was no room for half measures in his world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of collaboration, the team reached a breakthrough. They had a plan, a new approach that could fix the issues without delaying the mission. Musk's heart lifted as he saw the relief wash over the team. "We've got this," he said, a rare smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "Let's make it happen," Gwen said, her voice filled with the same sense of resolve that had always characterized SpaceX's best moments. As the meeting broke up, Musk walked through the halls of SpaceX, watching his engineers and technicians scramble to implement the changes. It was a sight that filled him with pride. These were the people who would help make humanity's future possible. These were the people who would get them to Mars. As he looked out the window at the launch pad in the distance, he couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. There would be setbacks. But with his team, and with his vision guiding them, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Musk had never been one to shy away from challenges. He had fought through the courtroom, but now he was ready for the next fight, one that would take him far beyond the confines of Earth. And this time, it was a fight for humanity's future. It was only a few weeks after the resolution of the lawsuit when a new challenge arose, one that Musk hadn't anticipated. The launch preparations for the Mars mission were in full swing, and SpaceX had made significant strides in improving the rocket design. Everything seemed to be moving smoothly, until one morning, an unexpected call from his chief engineer, Ben, shifted the course of the day. "Elon," Ben said, his voice strained, "we've hit a major snag with the booster engines. They're not performing at the level we expected. It's affecting the entire fuel efficiency system, and if we don't fix it, we won't make the launch window. I'm afraid we'll have to delay everything for at least 6 months." Musk felt a wave of frustration rush through him. 6 months. That was an eternity in his world. 6 months in the race to make life multiplanetary could mean losing critical momentum. He didn't have time to waste. "Ben," Musk said, his voice sharp but calm, "we've been working towards this for too long. I want every possible solution on the table. No delays. Get me the best minds on this, and let's fix it. Now." Ben was silent for a moment, before responding. "Understood. We'll get to work immediately." Musk hung up the phone, staring out the window of his office, his mind racing. He knew that challenges were part of the game, but this felt different. The stakes were higher than ever before. Not only was SpaceX's mission to Mars at risk, but the entire future of interplanetary travel hinged on their success. Musk couldn't afford to let this problem linger. He picked up his phone again and called Gwen Shotwell. It was time for an emergency meeting. The SpaceX headquarters buzzed with activity as Musk arrived, the air filled with tension as the team scrambled to address the issues with the booster engines. Musk walked into the conference room, where Gwen, Ben, and the rest of the lead engineers were waiting. He could see the concern on their faces, but also the determination. They weren't about to let this setback stop them. Elon, Gwen greeted him with a tight smile, though her eyes revealed the weight of the situation. We've been working through the problem all morning. The issue seems to stem from the new fuel mixture we're testing. It's not reacting as expected with the booster's internal systems. Musk nodded, listening closely as Ben and the engineers ran through the details of the issue. They had come up with a few potential solutions, but none of them were guaranteed to work. Musk could feel the pressure mounting. Every decision they made would have lasting implications. "We're not giving up on this," Musk said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "SpaceX was built to solve problems, not avoid them. Let's find a way to make this work." The next several hours were spent in intense brainstorming sessions. Musk pushed the team to think outside the box, challenging them to consider alternatives they had previously ruled out. Every possibility, no matter how unlikely, was explored. There was no room for complacency. Musk had long understood that true innovation wasn't about following the established path. It was about blazing new trails, even when the way forward seemed unclear. The engineers worked around the clock, testing different mixtures and recalibrating the systems. Musk stayed by their side, leading with his characteristic intensity. He didn't let them get discouraged, reminding them constantly of the bigger picture. The mission to Mars, the future of humanity, every challenge was just another step in that journey. As the hours passed, they began to see glimmers of hope. The fuel mixture was finally starting to show promise, and the booster engines were regaining their performance. But there was still work to be done. Musk could feel his body growing tired, but his mind was sharper than ever. He knew that if they were going to pull this off, they needed to push through the fatigue. At 3 a.m., as the team was preparing for another round of testing, Ben looked up with a grin. "Elon," he said, "I think we've got it. The new fuel combination is working. We're on track to hit the performance benchmarks." Musk's heart leapt in his chest. It wasn't over yet, but this was the breakthrough they needed. He looked around the room at the engineers who had worked tirelessly, their faces lit with exhaustion but also relief. Musk could see it in their eyes. They had done the impossible once again. "Great work," Musk said, his voice a little hoarse from the long hours. "This is exactly what we needed." Gwen walked over to him, a proud smile on her face. "You pushed us hard today, Elon, but I think we've got it." Musk nodded. "We're not done yet, but this is the kind of work we need to be doing. Every time the odds are stacked against us, we need to fight even harder." The team gathered their things and headed off to prepare for the next round of tests, leaving Musk standing in the middle of the room. He allowed himself a brief moment of reflection, taking in the accomplishment. This was the essence of SpaceX. Never giving up, no matter how tough the challenge. And this time, the stakes had never been higher. As he walked back to his office, Musk took a deep breath. He had come so far, but the road ahead was still filled with obstacles. Yet, he wasn't afraid. He knew that every failure, every setback, every challenge was simply another opportunity to prove what was possible. He sat at his desk and began to make plans for the next phase of the mission. The work was far from over. The world was waiting, and the future was calling. There was no time to rest. The tension of the previous few weeks had drained Musk in ways he couldn't fully explain. But as always, there was no time to rest. SpaceX had overcome the engineering setback with the Mars mission, but a new problem was on the horizon. With the next launch only a few months away, Musk found himself constantly torn between overseeing the intricacies of SpaceX, Tesla's advancements, and his other ventures. He was operating on very little sleep, barely enough time to even enjoy the quiet moments of his day. Yet, in the midst of this relentless pace, something unexpected happened: a visitor. It was late on a Friday afternoon when a nondescript black car pulled up outside SpaceX headquarters. Elon was in a meeting with the team when he saw through his office window a man in a dark suit stepping out of the vehicle. The man seemed familiar, yet Musk couldn't place him immediately. He had a certain air of authority about him. The man walked with purpose, his every step seemingly calculated. And when he entered the building, he made no attempt to blend in. He was an anomaly among the usual group of engineers and tech experts that roamed the hallways. Musk, who rarely allowed disruptions to sidetrack him, couldn't help but feel a rising curiosity. The man was escorted by one of SpaceX's security team members, who led him directly to Musk's office. The knock on the door interrupted the flow of the meeting. "Elon," Gwen said, her voice soft but with an edge of confusion. "There's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent." Musk looked up, puzzled. "Urgent?" He stood and walked toward the door, the usual calm that defined him replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. As he opened the door, the man in the suit stood there, towering slightly over Musk. His eyes were cool, calculating, and framed by sharp features that spoke of a life in service to high-stakes operations. He wore a stern look, as though his very presence demanded respect. In his hand was a sleek leather briefcase. "Elon Musk?" the man asked, his voice low and deliberate. "That's me," Musk replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" "I'm Agent Wells," the man said, flashing a badge briefly, a crisp, official badge. "I represent a special division of the U.S. government. I believe we need to talk." Musk was taken aback. His first thought was to brush the situation off. After all, he was no stranger to government interference in his projects. He had dealt with bureaucratic red tape countless times before, but there was something different about this encounter. "Agent Wells, I'm a bit busy at the moment," Musk said, still trying to make sense of the situation. "What's this about?" "I understand, Mr. Musk," Wells said with a measured tone, "but what I'm about to discuss is beyond the scope of a normal meeting. It involves not just your ventures, but the very future of national security." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I need your help." Musk's mind went into overdrive. "National security?" he repeated. "I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm not in the business of government contracts." Wells didn't flinch. "What I'm asking you is not about contracts. It's about something far more pressing. You've built a private space company that is now on the cutting edge of space exploration, Mr. Musk, and I'm sure you've heard of recent events in space. We've been dealing with issues that extend beyond the realm of private enterprise." Musk's interest peaked. He leaned against his desk, his arms crossed as he studied Wells carefully. "Go on," he said, now more curious than skeptical. "We're dealing with classified intel that suggests certain foreign powers have been making unauthorized attempts to access satellite networks. The risk to global security is enormous. And while SpaceX has made incredible advancements in space technology, we need your expertise, your resources, and your unique position in the field to help us respond. We're requesting your cooperation, but also an understanding of the scope of the potential threats." Musk absorbed the information, his mind racing through 1,000 different thoughts. National security? Foreign powers? This was no longer about private space exploration. This was about geopolitics, warfare, and perhaps a new kind of arms race in space. Musk had always operated on the fringes of traditional industry, but this felt different. He had always been about innovation, but now the stakes felt higher. "I see," Musk said, pacing slowly as he tried to grasp the magnitude of the situation. "So, what exactly do you want from me? And why now?" Agent Wells placed his briefcase on the desk. He opened it and pulled out a sealed folder, placing it gently in front of Musk. "I'm here to present you with a request, Mr. Musk. The U.S. government needs your help in securing vital satellite systems and ensuring that space remains safe and accessible for peaceful exploration and progress. We can't do it alone, and frankly, we're not equipped for the scale of what's unfolding." Musk didn't immediately reach for the folder. Instead, he studied the agent closely. The urgency, the secrecy. It was all too much to ignore. "And if I say no?" Musk asked, his voice steady, though his mind was processing rapidly. Agent Wells met his gaze with the same unwavering intensity. "You have every right to decline, of course. But let's just say, Mr. Musk, that the future of the space frontier may look very different depending on what decisions are made in the next few weeks. We'll need a response from you soon." Musk let the silence hang in the air, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. For years, he had operated in the realm of private companies and individual freedom. Now, it seemed, the very fabric of that autonomy was being challenged. "Give me a moment," Musk finally said, "to think it over." Agent Wells nodded, closing the folder and standing up. "We'll be waiting for your response." As the agent left, the room felt heavier. Musk was alone with his thoughts. For all his ambition, All his dreams of space exploration, this was an entirely new realm, one that combined the very personal with the very political. He knew the world was changing, but this was something entirely different. Musk wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next. He picked up the folder, staring at it for a long moment before opening it. There, staring back at him, was a document that could change everything. Elon Musk sat in the stillness of his office, the weight of the decision before him pressing harder than ever. The folder Agent Wells had left on his desk seemed almost to pulse with significance. He hadn't opened it immediately. Instead, he had allowed himself a moment of reflection. The request from the U.S. government was not just a business proposal. It was a lifeline, or a noose, depending on how he chose to view it. The calm outside his office windows seemed to mock the storm brewing within. The sprawling SpaceX campus was still, peaceful even. Yet, Musk's mind was reeling. He had always considered himself a private operator, someone who defied convention and built a future on his own terms. This, however, was something he couldn't handle alone. For years, Musk had dedicated himself to the pursuit of space exploration, to pushing humanity's boundaries and creating a sustainable future on Mars. Every goal, every challenge, had been an opportunity for him to redefine what was possible. But now, the very thing that had driven him to build SpaceX, the desire to unlock the unknown, was being tainted by a new question. Would he be forced to align with the very government he had often clashed with to protect something as fragile as global security? He couldn't ignore the truth of it all. The world was evolving rapidly. Space, once the final frontier for exploration, was quickly becoming a theater of international conflict, the stakes higher than ever before. And now, it seemed he had been pulled into the fray whether he liked it or not. Musk looked at the folder again. He opened it, the contents inside immediately drawing his attention. There were intelligence reports, satellite schematics, and the most disturbing, names. Foreign governments and corporations linked to the threats they had been monitoring. It was an overwhelming amount of information, but Musk wasn't one to shy away from complexity. He scanned through it quickly, but the implications of what he read made his stomach churn. The threat wasn't just theoretical, it was imminent. Musk had been aware of the growing global tensions regarding space exploration, but this was on a different scale. There were players on the international stage, powerful entities who were not simply launching satellites for research or communications. They were positioning themselves for control, a dangerous game that had far-reaching consequences for the future of space travel. For a long time, Musk had stayed focused on his singular goal, Mars. But now, he was realizing that the future of his dream, of humanity's future, might not just be written in the stars. It could very well be shaped by the forces here on Earth. His phone buzzed, snapping him back to reality. It was a text from Gwen Shotwell. "Everything okay? You look deep in thought. If you need a sounding board, let me know." Musk stared at the message for a moment. Gwen had been with him from the beginning, always a steadying force when his mind started to spiral. She understood the big picture, the long-term goals. But did she understand this? Did anyone? He stood up from his desk and walked over to the large windows that overlooked the launch site. The first Mars-bound rocket stood tall, gleaming in the distance, a testament to his unwavering commitment. But in that moment, Musk wasn't sure if the vision that had driven him for so long was still the same. It was time for a decision. Later that day, he gathered his closest team members in a private conference room. Gwen arrived first, followed by Ben, the chief engineer, and a few other trusted SpaceX leaders. Musk didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need your thoughts on something serious," Musk began, his voice uncharacteristically grave. "The U.S. government has approached me with a request for assistance. They've told me they need our help securing space systems due to rising threats from foreign powers." The room went quiet. Gwen, who had seen Musk face down impossible odds, now seemed on edge. Ben frowned, adjusting his glasses as he processed the information. "This sounds like a shift from the usual," Ben said, his tone careful. "What kind of threats are we talking about?" Musk didn't hesitate. "We're talking about rogue actors with the ability to compromise satellite networks. The government believes these threats are imminent, and they want our involvement." "You mean military involvement?" Gwen asked, her voice sharp. but controlled. Musk nodded. Yes, potentially. There's no ambiguity here. They're not asking us to build rockets for exploration. They're asking us to secure space systems, and the stakes are global. There was a long pause as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. You're talking about getting involved in geopolitics, not just space exploration, Ben said quietly, the concern in his voice palpable. That's a huge leap. I know, Musk replied, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. But this isn't just about our mission to Mars anymore. It's about the future of the whole damn planet. We may be the only ones with the technology to prevent an arms race in space, or worse, a war. If we don't act now, it could set us back decades. Gwen leaned forward, her eyes searching Musk's face. And what's your gut telling you? Do we get involved? Musk hesitated. This was the moment of truth. He could see the look in their eyes, the concern, but also the trust. They had been with him through thick and thin, building this dream together. But this was a different kind of challenge. It wasn't just about rockets. It was about the very fabric of the world's future. I don't know, Musk admitted, but I don't think we can sit back and ignore this. If the government wants to collaborate, we need to weigh the risks. I don't want to compromise what we stand for, but I also know that space is a battlefield now, whether we like it or not. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This could change everything. If Musk decided to cooperate, it could alter the course of SpaceX forever. But if he didn't, there was no telling how the world, and his mission, would be affected. Gwen spoke again, her voice steady. Then I think we need to proceed carefully, but cautiously. Let's gather more intel before making a final decision. If we do this, we have to be sure we can retain our independence while working with the government. Musk nodded, grateful for her clarity. Agreed. We need to move fast, but we need to know what we're getting into. The meeting ended with more questions than answers. But for Musk, the decision was clear. He would help. He would do what was necessary to protect the future of humanity. No matter what it cost. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following the meeting were filled with a sense of urgency Musk had rarely felt. Every conversation seemed more weighty, every decision more consequential. The world he once viewed as a playground for innovation now felt like a chessboard, with each move potentially shifting the future of space and global security. Gwen had been right. They needed to proceed with caution. The decision wasn't just about helping the government. It was about finding the balance between their ideals and the harsh reality of the world they lived in. For years, SpaceX had been at the forefront of private space exploration, breaking the status quo and doing what many had considered impossible. But this request, this alliance with the government, could alter the entire landscape. Musk had spent sleepless nights poring over the documents Agent Wells had left him, meeting with his inner circle and quietly debating the merits of collaboration. But as much as he tried to focus on the grander picture, something nagged at him. There was a layer to this situation that wasn't being fully revealed. A hidden agenda, perhaps? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the government's request than simple national security. Musk had been involved in the tech world for too long to not recognize the signs of a deeper, more insidious motive. There were pieces to the puzzle that didn't quite fit. He had built SpaceX from the ground up with a core belief in pushing humanity's boundaries, but now, he wasn't sure if the boundaries being pushed were the ones he had intended. To figure out what was really at play, Musk decided to investigate further. He wasn't just going to take Wells at his word. He'd made it this far by questioning everything and trusting few. If the government wanted his help, he was going to need more than vague threats and cryptic promises. Late one evening, after a long day of meetings, Musk was at his desk when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and saw that it was an encrypted message from an anonymous source. The text read, "They're hiding something, Elon. You need to dig deeper. The government isn't just concerned about space security. There's a bigger play, and you're already in the middle of it." Musk's heart skipped a beat. His instincts, the ones that had served him so well in business and in life, told him that this was no random message. Someone knew something. The question was, who? He quickly encrypted his own message in return. "What do you mean? Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Not important who I am. What matters is what you're being drawn into. You're a pawn in a larger game. Watch your back, Elon. The message ended there, offering no further explanation. Musk's mind raced. Was it a prank? A hoax? Or was it someone truly warning him about a conspiracy that went deeper than he had ever imagined? He couldn't ignore the message. He had to know more. But how? His every move was being watched, and his every step scrutinized. The last thing he needed was to make an enemy of the very people he might need to rely on in the future. Yet, if there was a hidden agenda, he couldn't ignore it. Musk sat back in his chair, the weight of his options bearing down on him. SpaceX was more than just a company to him. It was a vision, his vision, of a future where humanity could transcend the limitations of Earth. But now, that vision seemed to be at odds with the complex web of geopolitics he was being dragged into. He needed answers. Fast. The next day, Musk arranged for a private meeting with Agent Wells. He wasn't going to be taken by surprise again. This time, he was going in armed with the knowledge that there was more to the story. As he entered the conference room, he found Wells already seated, looking as composed as ever. The agent gave Musk a nod of acknowledgement, but there was an edge in his eyes now, a subtle shift that Musk noticed immediately. "Mr. Musk," Wells said, "I trust you've had some time to consider our proposal." "I've been thinking a lot about it," Musk replied. "But before we proceed, I need some answers. You mentioned national security, but there's something else going on here. I know there's more than you're telling me. What's the real objective of this mission?" Wells' expression remained neutral, but Musk could see a flicker of tension in his eyes. The agent shifted in his seat, the air between them thickening. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to," Wells said carefully. Musk leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "I've been getting information. Anonymous sources warning me that there's something bigger at play. A hidden agenda. So, if you want my help, I need to know everything. No more secrets." For a moment, there was silence. Wells' eyes flickered to the door, as though he was calculating the risk of saying too much. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Musk, you're right to be cautious. But this is more complicated than you realize. The threat we're dealing with isn't just about national security or space. It's about control. Control of information, control of resources, control of power. We've seen this before, and it's no longer just about military dominance. It's about global influence." Musk's heart raced. "And what does this have to do with me?" "SpaceX is one of the most advanced private entities in the world," Wells continued. "Your work on satellite technology, communications, and rocket systems has put you in a position of power. That makes you a target, and it also makes you an asset. But there's more. There are factions, both foreign and domestic, that see space as the final frontier for dominance. If we don't act now, someone else will. The consequences would be catastrophic." Musk sat back in his chair, digesting what he had just heard. This was no longer about simply helping secure satellites. This was about something far more profound. He had been drawn into a game much larger than himself. "I'm listening," Musk said, his voice calm but filled with the understanding that his world had just shifted. Wells leaned in, his voice low and intense. "If you don't help us, Elon, the future of space exploration and the future of humanity will be rewritten by those who would use it for their own gain. And that future may not be one we want to live in." The conversation with Agent Wells had left Elon Musk with more questions than answers. The weight of the world, or rather, the weight of space, seemed to settle deeper on his shoulders with each passing hour. For years, his focus had been clear. SpaceX was going to revolutionize space exploration, and humanity would eventually live on Mars. But now, he realized that the path to Mars was no longer as straightforward as it had once seemed. The government had painted a picture of a clear and present danger, one that had to be confronted head-on. The threat to global space infrastructure was real, they claimed. But the more Musk thought about it, the more it felt like he was being drawn into something far more complicated, far more dangerous than any of them were willing to admit. Musk had always prided himself on thinking differently, on seeing patterns where others saw chaos. He had always prided himself on knowing when to push back and when to lead. But now, he wasn't sure if the forces at play were too big for even him to control. The following day, Musk gathered his senior leadership team once again. This time, the mood in the room was different. The usual energy, the sense of purpose that had driven SpaceX for years, was replaced with a quiet, cautious tension. Everyone knew this meeting would be unlike any other. "We need to talk about where we're headed," Musk began, his voice firm, though tinged with a new sense of urgency. "I had a meeting with Agent Wells yesterday. He gave me some insight into the government's request, and I have a feeling there's something more going on here than we've been told." Gwen Shotwell, who had seen Musk in his most intense moments, was quick to speak up. "What do you mean by that?" "The threat the government's talking about. It's real, isn't it? We've been hearing about space weaponization for months now." "But if you're saying there's more to it," Musk nodded grimly, "there's more. There's something about the way they've framed it that doesn't sit right with me. I think we're being used, and not just in the way we've been led to believe." Wells talked about control of space, control of resources. But what if it's bigger than that? What if we're talking about global dominance? Ben, SpaceX's chief engineer, shifted in his seat, a mixture of concern and confusion crossing his face. "Are you saying they're trying to use us as pawns in some larger power play?" "I think they already have," Musk replied. "It's clear to me now that the government isn't just trying to protect space infrastructure. They want to control it, and they see us as either a threat or a potential ally in that control." The room was silent for a long moment. The idea was so far removed from their usual line of thinking that it was hard to process. "Do we cooperate?" Ben asked, the question hanging heavily in the air. "Or do we distance ourselves and risk everything we've built?" "I don't have a clear answer yet," Musk replied, his voice more uncertain than they were used to hearing. "But I do know one thing. We need more information. This isn't just about national security. This is about the future of space and the future of humanity." Later that afternoon, as Musk walked out of the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his entire world was on the brink of unraveling. For years, he had been the one pushing boundaries, rewriting the rules of what was possible. But now, it felt like the world was pushing back, and no amount of innovation could protect him from the larger forces at play. He headed back to his office, his mind whirring with possibilities. The more he thought about Wells' cryptic warning, the more it made sense. Space wasn't just a new frontier for exploration. It was the new battleground for power, and control of space meant control of the future. As Musk sat at his desk, the phone rang, cutting through his thoughts. It was Gwen. "Elon, I think we need to look at this from a different angle," she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "I've been doing some digging, and I found something that could be important." Musk leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What did you find?" "I found that the government has been quietly pushing a series of bills aimed at regulating private space companies. They're starting with us. They want to make us a part of the National Space Defense Initiative, which, as you know, would place a significant amount of our operations under government control. But there's more. There's an organization that's been working behind the scenes, shaping the future of space regulation. It's not just government. There's a bigger group involved." Musk's heart skipped a beat. "What group?" "I'm not sure yet," Gwen admitted, "but I'm getting closer. I need more time." Musk sat back in his chair, absorbing her words. This was the lead he had been looking for, the first real clue in a much larger puzzle. "I don't have time, Gwen," Musk replied, his voice tight with frustration. "The government's already involved. The clock's ticking, and we don't have much leverage left. I need to know who's pulling the strings." "I'll keep digging," Gwen said, "but we may not have much time." As the hours passed, the sense of urgency grew stronger. Musk knew that he was standing on the precipice of something that could change everything, for SpaceX, for him personally, and for the future of humanity. The path forward was clouded in uncertainty, but one thing was becoming clear. The government and the players behind it were pushing for more than just security. They were after control of space, control of information, and ultimately control of the future. Musk couldn't shake the nagging thought that something bigger was happening, something that went beyond anything he had imagined. The government's request was just the beginning of a much larger game, and he was already deeply entangled in it. He had to make a decision soon. But was the world really ready for the truth? The days following the urgent meeting with Gwyn were a blur of restless nights and constant worry. Elon Musk felt a rising tension, like a storm on the horizon, only he couldn't quite see the full scale of it. He wasn't just fighting for SpaceX anymore. He was fighting for the very idea of space exploration itself. The government, with its seemingly endless power, was poised to control the future of space. And if Gwyn's research proved correct, it wasn't just about protecting national security. Musk was more convinced than ever that the game was far bigger than anyone could have imagined. The thought gnawed at him as he tried to remain calm and focused on the task ahead, but his mind couldn't shake the question, who was really behind this? Musk sat in his office late one night, staring out at the sprawling SpaceX campus below. The dim lights of the launch pad in the distance blinked like distant stars. This place, this company, had been his dream. It had been his life's work. But now, it felt as if that dream was being hijacked by unseen forces, ones that controlled the narrative without him ever even realizing. Gwyn had promised to dig deeper into the hidden organization manipulating space regulations. He knew they didn't have much time. The government was already tightening its grip, and SpaceX's independence was under threat. Musk had to act quickly. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he picked it up, a sense of anticipation building. It was a message from Gwyn. "I think I found something. Meet me at the usual place tomorrow, 10 a.m. This is bigger than I thought." Musk's heart raced. He had a feeling that tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, as the sun rose, Musk was already on his way to the meeting spot. He could barely eat breakfast, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on him. His mind raced through every possible outcome, trying to anticipate what Gwyn had uncovered. When he arrived at the small cafe where they often met, Gwyn was already seated at a corner table. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of grim determination. She gestured for him to sit down, her fingers nervously tapping the side of her coffee cup. "Elon, I've been tracking the paperwork," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The bills I told you about, they aren't just about regulating private space companies. There's a much deeper connection to the global power structure. The organization I mentioned? It's called the Syndicate." Musk raised an eyebrow. "The Syndicate? Never heard of it." "It's an underground organization that's been pulling the strings behind major political decisions for decades. They're made up of elites, high-level government officials, military contractors, and tech moguls. People you would never suspect. They've been manipulating global politics for years, and now they're setting their sights on space." Musk's eyes widened. "What do they want with space?" "They want control," Gwyn replied, her voice steady but filled with an edge of fear. "Control of space resources, control of satellite networks, control of communications. The Syndicate's goal is to monopolize space, and they want to use SpaceX as a tool to get there. They've already infiltrated the highest levels of government, and they're using the threat of war and global instability to push their agenda. The bills, the regulations, they're all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to secure their dominance." Musk sat back, absorbing her words. "But why us? Why SpaceX?" "Because SpaceX is the one company that's changed the game," Gwyn explained. "You've made space travel a reality for private enterprises. You've revolutionized satellite technology, and your success with reusable rockets has put you ahead of the competition. The Syndicate knows that if they control you, they control the future of space." Musk's mind raced. The Syndicate, the government. It all made sense now. The hidden forces behind the scenes had been manipulating the very foundation of what he had spent his life building. Space was no longer just a frontier for exploration. It had become the ultimate battleground for power and control. As Musk and Gwyn sat in the cafe, the weight of the information they had uncovered hung heavily in the air. The Syndicate wasn't just a shadowy group of conspirators. It was a well-oiled machine that had been pulling the strings of world events for years. SpaceX, the very company Musk had founded to bring humanity to the stars, was now caught in their web. For the first time in a long time, Musk felt like the playing field was no longer level. The power dynamics had shifted, and he was now facing an enemy more powerful than he had ever imagined. The Syndicate had the resources, the influence, and the global reach to control everything. But Musk wasn't the kind of person who backed down from a challenge. I won't let them control SpaceX, Musk said, his voice firm. But we can't go public with this information yet. We need to find a way to take them down from the inside. Gwynn nodded. Exactly. We can't afford to let the syndicate know we're onto them. The first step is to find out who's involved. If we can expose them, we can take away their power. The following weeks were a blur of covert meetings, encrypted messages, and careful planning. Musk and Gwynn worked tirelessly to uncover the identities of the syndicate's members. They had to be methodical, precise. Any misstep could put them both in grave danger. Each lead they uncovered only seemed to reveal a deeper, more insidious layer of corruption. The syndicate was everywhere, in politics, in business, in the military. They had their hands in everything. And the more Musk dug, the more he realized that the syndicate wasn't just manipulating governments and corporations. They were manipulating public opinion, using media and propaganda to shape the narrative to their advantage. But with every piece of the puzzle they put together, Musk began to feel a growing sense of resolve. He had faced impossible odds before. He had built SpaceX from the ground up, defied the critics, and sent rockets to the stars. This time, however, the battle wasn't just about building a new world. It was about fighting for the freedom to explore, to innovate, and to break free from the shackles of power that sought to control humanity's future. Musk wasn't going to let the syndicate win. Not now, not ever. The days turned into weeks, and the deeper Elon Musk and Gwynn Shotwell dug into the syndicate's operations, the more dangerous their situation became. The organization was more powerful than they had imagined. It was as if every turn they took led to another well-guarded secret, another layer of influence that the syndicate had woven into the fabric of the global political and corporate landscape. Elon spent sleepless nights pacing in his office, staring out over the SpaceX campus. The stakes had never been higher. Space exploration, which had once felt like a mission of idealism and progress, had now become a battle for control. Every move they made had to be calculated, precise. Any wrong step could lead to their downfall. Gwynn had managed to unearth some key players within the syndicate, though their names remained hidden behind layers of security. But one thing was certain. The syndicate was not just interested in monopolizing space. They had their eyes on something far more valuable: information. As the layers of corruption unfolded, Musk and Gwynn came to the conclusion that the syndicate was using space as a means of controlling not just the physical world but the flow of data itself. They controlled global communication satellites, which meant they could control who had access to information. And in today's world, information was more valuable than anything. The realization hit Elon hard. Space had become the ultimate resource. Whoever controlled space controlled the future. One evening, after a long day of sifting through encrypted files and analyzing intelligence, Musk and Gwynn sat across from each other at a small conference table in one of the private rooms within SpaceX headquarters. They hadn't spoken much that day, their focus solely on the task at hand. But now, as the enormity of their discoveries weighed on them, there was a shared sense of urgency in the air. "I think it's time we make a move," Musk said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a fire behind his words, the determination to fight back. Gwynn looked up from the tablet she'd been scanning. "What do you mean by make a move? Are you suggesting we confront them directly?" Musk leaned forward. "Not yet. We don't have all the pieces. But I think we need to make an alliance, a dangerous one. If we're going to take down the syndicate, we need to work with someone who has the power and the resources to level the playing field." Gwynn's expression darkened. "You're not suggesting we work with the government, are you? They're just as complicit as the syndicate in all this." "I'm not talking about the government," Musk replied. "I'm talking about someone who's in a position to help us, someone with the leverage to get us access to information we wouldn't be able to get otherwise." Gwynn's eyes narrowed, as if weighing his words carefully. "Who do you have in mind?" "Elon, I don't know if you've considered the implications, but there's one person who might have the power we need." "The CIA," Musk said, his tone unwavering. "The CIA has resources, connections, and access to information we can't get through normal channels." Gwynn's face tensed. "You're suggesting we align ourselves with an intelligence agency? That's dangerous, Elon. They play by their own rules." "I know," Musk said, his voice firm. "But right now, we don't have any other options. If we're going to outsmart the syndicate, we need an ally with the right tools. We can't do this on our own. There was a long pause as Gwyn considered his words. I agree that we need help, but are you sure the CIA is the right choice? They have their own agenda, and who's to say they won't use us for their own purposes? Musk's expression hardened. I'm not naive. I'm fully aware of the risks, but we don't have the luxury of being picky. We need to make moves now, before the syndicate takes everything from us. Over the next few days, Musk and Gwyn put together a plan. They reached out to a trusted contact within the CIA, someone they'd worked with in the past on minor space-related matters. This contact, a high-ranking officer named John Pierce, was known to be deeply involved in covert operations. If anyone could help them navigate the murky waters of espionage and uncover the syndicate's secrets, it was him. It wasn't long before they received a cryptic message back from Pierce, inviting them to a meeting. The location was secure, off the books, and far from the eyes of prying cameras. The meeting took place in an underground parking garage on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. The air was heavy with tension as Musk and Gwyn approached the designated vehicle, a nondescript black SUV that would transport them to the rendezvous point. The moment they stepped inside, they were met with the cold, calculating gaze of John Pierce. You've come a long way, Pierce said, his voice low and clipped. I assume you understand the risks of involving the CIA in this matter. Musk didn't hesitate. We understand the risks, but we also understand the stakes. The syndicate is moving fast, and if we don't stop them now, it's over for everyone. Pierce studied them for a moment before responding. You're right. The syndicate's reach extends further than you realize. But you're not the only ones with an interest in taking them down. There are factions within the CIA itself that want to see the syndicate dismantled. However, we need to be careful. We need to move strategically. And you're willing to help? Gwyn asked, her voice sharp. Pierce leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. For the right price. But make no mistake, this won't be easy. You'll have to do exactly as I say, no questions asked. If you're in for the long haul. Musk didn't flinch. We're in. Whatever it takes. As the meeting concluded, Musk and Gwyn left the parking garage with a new ally, and an even greater sense of urgency. The CIA, with its vast resources and hidden influence, was now part of the equation. Musk couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into a dangerous game, one that could easily spin out of control. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't alone in this fight anymore. The deal with the CIA had been struck, but the weight of it settled uneasily on Musk's shoulders. What had once seemed like a clear mission, taking down the syndicate, was now tangled in a web of espionage and shifting alliances. Musk, a man who had spent his life building a space company from the ground up, was now finding himself on the edge of a battle that was far more complex and dangerous than he had ever imagined. The CIA was playing a game with rules that Musk didn't fully understand, and that made him uncomfortable. They didn't just have the power. They had the leverage. The following week, Musk and Gwyn met with Pierce at an undisclosed location. This time, it wasn't in the underground parking garage. The CIA had arranged for a more private setting, an abandoned building on the outskirts of a rural town. It felt like something out of a spy movie, but Musk knew the stakes were real, and the danger was palpable. Gwyn glanced at Musk, her face set with determination. We need to get this right, Elon. There's no turning back now. Musk nodded, his thoughts focused. The weight of the information they had already uncovered about the syndicate was staggering. It was one thing to suspect shadowy organizations pulling the strings behind the scenes, but it was another to know the extent of their control over global politics, technology, and the future of space exploration. They walked into the abandoned building, the air musty with dust, the echoes of their footsteps amplifying in the empty space. In the center of the room sat Pierce, flanked by two other men whom Musk recognized as high-ranking CIA agents. They were all serious, their faces unreadable. Pierce stood and motioned for them to sit. We've gathered intel, he said, his voice quiet but authoritative. The syndicate is moving faster than we anticipated. They're not just infiltrating governments and corporations. They've begun setting up covert operations in space, satellite communications, weaponry research. They're making moves that could change the global power structure. Musk's heart sank. What do you mean by weaponry research? The Syndicate is developing technology that could give them control over space in ways no one has imagined, Pierce explained. Imagine having the power to disable or destroy satellites at will. They've already begun testing weapon systems that could be deployed on orbiting platforms, rendering independent space ventures like SpaceX obsolete. The room grew cold with the gravity of his words. Musk's mind raced. If the Syndicate had the capability to control space itself, they would hold the world hostage. This is much bigger than we thought, Musk said, his voice low. How can we stop them? Pierce exchanged a glance with his agents and then leaned forward. We need to infiltrate their operations from within. We've identified key members of the Syndicate, but we need eyes on the ground. The CIA has access to surveillance satellites and classified intelligence, but we need someone with a direct connection to the space sector. Musk's heart skipped a beat. You want me to go undercover? Pierce didn't flinch. In a way, we need you to take a more active role in monitoring their movements. We can't just fight them from the outside. We need to go in, get their plans, and disrupt their operations. If we can gather enough intelligence on their technology, we might be able to turn the tide. Musk felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The CIA was asking him to put himself at risk, to infiltrate the very organization that was threatening everything he had worked for. It was a dangerous proposition, but it was the only option. Fine, Musk said, his resolve hardening. I'll do it, but I need the full resources of the CIA. I want complete access to everything you have, satellite footage, intelligence reports, you name it. Pierce didn't hesitate. You'll have it, but be careful, Elon. The Syndicate is watching everything. They know who you are, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. The next few weeks passed in a blur of covert operations. Musk found himself balancing two worlds, the high-stakes corporate world of SpaceX and the shadowy underworld of intelligence gathering. He had to be careful. The CIA was providing him with access to intelligence, but the closer he got to the Syndicate, the more dangerous things became. Gwen had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with their CIA contacts and helping Musk navigate the minefield. She was a trusted ally, but Musk knew that every step they took brought them closer to danger. They were no longer just building rockets. They were playing a high-stakes game with the future of space itself. One night, after a long day of meetings and debriefings, Musk sat alone in his office at SpaceX headquarters, staring out at the stars. He was exhausted, but there was a fire within him. He had been in many high-pressure situations before, but this felt different. The Syndicate wasn't just a competitor or a rival. They were an existential threat to the future of space. His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. It was a message from Gwen. We found something big. The Syndicate's next move is happening soon. I'll explain everything in the morning. Musk felt a surge of adrenaline. If this was what he thought it was, this could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. The following morning, Gwen arrived at his office, her face grim. She sat down across from him, a folder full of classified documents in her hands. We've identified the Syndicate's next target, she said, handing him the folder. They're planning to disrupt the upcoming launch of a major satellite project. If they succeed, they'll have a monopoly over global communications. Every private company, including SpaceX, will be shut out. Musk's heart pounded. When is it happening? Soon, Gwen replied. We need to move fast. If we don't stop them, it could be game over for us. Musk stood up, his mind racing. He had to act, and he had to act quickly. The stakes had never been higher. The Syndicate was making its move, and if they succeeded, the future of space exploration would be forever altered. The clock was ticking. The days following their discovery of the Syndicate's next move felt like a ticking bomb, the pressure building with each passing hour. Elon Musk's thoughts raced as he sat at his desk in his private office at SpaceX headquarters. His eyes darted over the intelligence Gwen had passed to him earlier that morning. Every word, every number, seemed to be a reminder of the gravity of what was coming. Gwen had been clear. The Syndicate was preparing to sabotage the launch of a critical satellite that would significantly advance space communications and further the work SpaceX had been building towards. If the Syndicate succeeded, not only would it cripple SpaceX's future endeavors, but it could also cripple communications across the globe, something Musk couldn't let happen. Do we have a plan? Musk asked Gwyn, who was now standing beside him, scanning through the intel on her own tablet. We're still piecing it together, Gwyn replied, her voice tense but determined. But we have a few options. First, we can go on the offensive and expose them directly, or we can play the long game and infiltrate their operation even deeper, use their own game against them. Musk rubbed his temples, trying to focus. The gravity of the situation weighed on him, but he knew he couldn't afford to freeze. Lives, including his own, were on the line. I don't like the idea of waiting for them to make the first move, Musk said. We need to get ahead of this. We need to stop them before they can strike. Gwyn nodded in agreement. We'll need the CIA's resources. We can't go in without their intel and backup. I'll reach out to Pierce. This is bigger than any of us, Musk said, his voice quiet but resolute. We can't afford to lose. Not now. Elon's call to Pierce went unanswered for several hours. Time felt as if it were slowing down as Musk waited, growing impatient and restless. He knew the CIA agent would eventually respond. He always did. But the delay only served to fuel his concern. The clock was ticking down, and every moment they wasted brought the syndicate closer to its goal. Finally, Pierce's voice crackled over the line. Elon, I know what you're thinking, but we've been working our own sources. The syndicate is smarter than you give them credit for, Pierce said, his voice stern. We can't risk making a move without understanding everything first. They've likely anticipated our counteraction. Musk didn't have the luxury of time. The launch is in 3 days. If we don't act now, it's over. You've got satellites, intel, the resources. I need everything you've got. We're moving forward, whether the syndicate is ready or not. There was a long pause before Pierce spoke again. Fine, but you need to trust me on this. We'll need a multi-pronged approach. We can't hit them from just one angle. I'm not playing around, Pierce, Musk said, his voice firm. We can't afford to lose. Pierce finally relented. All right, I'll get my team to work. You'll get your intel. Gwyn stayed glued to the intelligence feeds in the war room, sifting through the syndicate's activities. Her fingers flew over her tablet as she pinged the CIA's contacts for real-time satellite images, pulling together all the information they could gather. SpaceX's engineers were on standby, waiting for the order to proceed with the countermeasures that would shield the upcoming satellite launch from potential sabotage. The strategy was clear, though risky. They would infiltrate the syndicate's communications network, feed them false information, and confuse their next move. While the CIA's team handled the intelligence angle, Gwyn and Musk would lead the counter-operation in space. The stakes had never been higher, and failure was not an option. We're going to need to use the Falcon Heavy, Gwyn said, looking up from her tablet. It's the only one that can carry the payload we need to put into orbit and block their access. Musk's face hardened as he processed the gravity of what they were about to do. The Falcon Heavy was SpaceX's most powerful rocket, and sending it up with countermeasures would be risky. Any mistake could result in catastrophic failure, not just for the mission, but for their company's future. Get the team on it. Make sure the payload is secure, Musk ordered. His voice was calm, but the nerves were beginning to show through. This was more than just a launch. This was a direct confrontation with the syndicate. Gwyn stood and quickly began giving orders to SpaceX's top engineers. Musk's mind was already running through the possible outcomes, trying to predict what the syndicate might do in response. The covert mission was one thing, but their biggest challenge was that the syndicate had resources they couldn't even imagine. The tension between Elon Musk and the CIA was palpable. On one hand, Musk knew that he had the backing of a powerful agency, but on the other hand, he didn't trust them completely. The CIA had their own agenda, and while they were aligned on taking down the syndicate for now, Musk knew that alliances could shift quickly in high-stakes games like this. They were all playing a dangerous game, and no one could afford to let their guard down. The morning of the launch arrived, and everything felt surreal. The launch pad was buzzing with activity, the massive Falcon Heavy rocket standing tall against the blue sky, surrounded by engineers, technicians, and military personnel ensuring everything was in place. Musk stood at the base of the rocket, staring up at it with a mixture of awe and anxiety. Elon, Gwyn said, walking up beside him. The CIA reports say they've isolated some syndicate members in the region. We're close to taking down their network. Good, Musk replied, though the relief he felt was fleeting. We've got one shot at this. As the final countdown began, a new surge of adrenaline kicked in. The countdown clock ticked steadily, each second that passed bringing them closer to either victory or failure. The next few moments would determine the fate of not just SpaceX, but the future of space exploration itself. The voice of the mission commander crackled over the radio. T-minus 30 seconds, Falcon Heavy. Proceeding with final checks. Elon's breath caught in his throat as the seconds began to tick down. He glanced over at Gwyn, who was staring intently at the monitors. "Ready?" she asked, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Musk didn't look away from the rocket. "Ready as we'll ever be." As the engines roared to life and the Falcon Heavy ascended into the sky, Musk's thoughts raced. It wasn't just about the technology or the mission. It was about the future. The syndicate was out there, and with each passing moment, they would be one step closer to stopping them. The launch was a success, but it was only the beginning. The Falcon Heavy had soared into the sky, and for a brief moment, Musk allowed himself a breath of relief. The mission had been a success, but that success came at a price. The threat of the syndicate was still looming, and the momentary triumph didn't change the fact that the shadowy organization had set its sights on the next big move. Back in the control room at SpaceX headquarters, the team erupted into applause as the rocket made its ascent, but Musk's mind was elsewhere. The launch was only part of the plan, and he knew that the real test lay ahead. The syndicate wouldn't just sit idly by, they'd respond, and he needed to be prepared for whatever came next. "Gwyn," Musk said, turning to his trusted COO. "What's the latest intel?" Gwyn looked up from her tablet, her eyes sharp. "The CIA is reporting heavy movement. They've identified a syndicate cell located near one of the launch sites, and they're preparing to retaliate. It's only a matter of time before they try to sabotage the satellite we just launched or go after something else." Musk's jaw tightened. "We can't afford to give them an inch. What's the plan?" "We're going to need to go dark for a while," Gwyn said, her voice steady but serious. "I've arranged a safe house for us to lay low, but it's going to take a while to track the syndicate's next move. The CIA is tightening their grip on the intel, but we need more, faster." Musk nodded. "Good. Let's make sure we're always one step ahead. This fight isn't over." The safe house was located in a remote part of Northern California, a nondescript cabin hidden deep in the forest. No one outside of Musk's immediate circle knew about it. The quiet of the location was the perfect cover, but it felt suffocating, like being in a pressure cooker. Every minute spent there added to the feeling that the walls were closing in. They arrived just before sundown, and Musk immediately went to work, diving into reports and encrypted messages with the CIA. The intelligence gathered during the Falcon Heavy launch was pouring in, and every new piece of information painted a clearer picture of just how far the syndicate had infiltrated. For hours, they worked in silence, only the faint glow of screens illuminating the cabin. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on Musk's chest. Each time his phone buzzed with a new message, it sent a shiver down his spine. The syndicate was still out there, and they were beginning to target Musk more directly. A knock on the door broke his focus. Gwyn entered with a concerned look on her face. "Elon, you need to see this." Musk stood up and followed her to the back room, where a large monitor displayed a live video feed. The footage was grainy at first, but it became clear as the image sharpened. A group of armed men were loading crates onto trucks near one of SpaceX's remote satellite stations. "That's not just a simple heist," Musk murmured, leaning in closer. "Those are syndicate operatives." Gwyn didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. They were moving, and they were moving fast. "We need to intercept them before they reach the facility," Musk said, already pulling on his jacket and heading for the door. The team mobilized quickly. Gwyn worked on coordinating with the CIA's tactical units, while Musk prepared SpaceX's private security team for an on-the-ground response. They weren't just dealing with another corporate saboteur. This was a coordinated, well-funded operation by an organization with global reach. Musk's mind raced as he looked at the map of the satellite station. The distance was too great for a simple intervention, but they couldn't let the syndicate breach the site. If they succeeded, the satellite's data, some of the most valuable in the world, could be stolen or destroyed. A few hours later, they were en route, the team traveling in a convoy of SUVs, engines humming against the thick night air. Musk's thoughts were elsewhere as the headlights sliced through the darkness. Every moment they spent on the road was a moment the syndicate could use to their advantage. As the convoy neared the satellite station, Musk's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Pierce. The syndicate has activated a secondary layer of defense around the station. They're more prepared than we thought. You need to make this quick. Musk's grip tightened on the wheel. They've got backup. It's going to be a bloodier fight than we expected. Gwen leaned forward, her eyes scanning the terrain ahead. We'll get there in time, Elon. We always do. When they arrived at the facility, the tension was palpable. The entire area was surrounded by high fences, infrared sensors, and guards. It was clear that the syndicate had anticipated a potential attack and fortified their position. This isn't going to be easy, one of the security officers muttered, eyeing the perimeter. But we can do it. Musk nodded. We'll need to move fast, and we'll need to take them by surprise. The plan was simple: divide the team into two groups. One would breach the facility and take out the syndicate operatives inside, while the other would disable their communications and cut off their escape routes. There was no room for error. If they failed to act quickly enough, the syndicate would disappear into the night, leaving them with nothing but more questions and more problems. The team split up and moved into position, their movements swift and coordinated. Musk and Gwen led the charge, moving through the shadows, their every step calculated. The plan was working so far, but they couldn't let their guard down for even a second. Inside the facility, the battle was intense. Gunshots echoed through the air as Musk's team engaged with the syndicate operatives, moving through the labyrinthine hallways of the complex. Each corner they turned brought a new challenge, a new wave of enemies. Musk's heart was racing, but his focus never wavered. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of space itself. The syndicate's goal wasn't just to take down SpaceX. It was to control everything Musk had worked for, everything he had built. The firefight lasted longer than Musk had anticipated. Every time they thought they had secured a position, another wave of syndicate operatives would rush in to counterattack. But Musk's team was relentless, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the syndicate operatives were taken down, and the facility was secure. Musk exhaled, his body exhausted but his mind still sharp. The facility had been saved, but the war was far from over. The syndicate would regroup, they would find another way to strike, and they would keep coming until Musk and his team were completely defeated. But for now, they had won this battle. The morning after the battle at the satellite facility, the atmosphere inside the safe house felt different. There was a rare sense of quiet victory, but it didn't last long. Musk had always known that every win against the syndicate would only bring them closer to the next confrontation. No one had really let their guard down. Not yet. Gwen was seated across from Musk, her eyes scanning through the piles of intelligence data they'd gathered from the fight. The syndicate had been well prepared, and their involvement ran deeper than Musk had anticipated. As a businessman and tech visionary, Musk was used to thinking about systems, about how things worked and how to outsmart them. But this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. What's next? Musk asked, leaning back in his chair. Gwen didn't need to look up. They won't stop. They never do. But we're not going to let them control the narrative. We have enough intel now to go after their leadership. If we take out their top players, it could crumble the whole organization. Musk's eyes narrowed. He'd heard of the syndicate's top players, elusive figures whose identities were shrouded in mystery. The deeper they dug into the organization, the more tangled the web became. They had resources everywhere, connections in government, technology companies, and even deep pockets in international markets. The fact that they were after SpaceX was proof enough that they understood the immense power Musk wielded. How do we find them? Musk asked. We know they're using proxies, but that's not enough to bring them down. Gwen leaned forward. We've got a lead. One of the syndicate's front companies has been laundering money through a shell corporation. The name on the paperwork is nothing but a ghost. No one has seen or heard from them. But our sources in the CIA have tracked down an address linked to this individual. It's in the heart of New York City. Musk's heart skipped a beat. New York. The syndicate was getting bold. They weren't just hiding in the shadows anymore. They were going public in ways that would make them impossible to ignore. The city was a literal and figurative crossroads of power, and going after them in their own territory meant that Musk and his team would be diving headfirst into the lion's den. "We'll need to move fast," Musk said. "Once they realize we're after them, they'll start covering their tracks. We can't afford to wait." "We've got the CIA's backup," Gwynn said. "This is our best shot at taking down their command structure. But it's going to be dangerous. No more pulling punches. We go in full force." Musk nodded, knowing she was right. But despite the obvious danger, there was a fire burning within him. The thought of the syndicate targeting his company and his future made his blood boil. He wasn't going to back down now. "We go in tonight," Musk said, determination heavy in his voice. "Get the team ready." Later that evening, Musk and Gwynn stood alongside a specially trained team of CIA operatives and SpaceX security forces. They were in a small, unmarked jet on their way to New York, and the tension in the air was palpable. No one spoke, but every one of them understood the gravity of what lay ahead. The flight was short, but it felt like an eternity. Musk sat quietly, staring out the window, lost in thought. He had been to New York countless times, but this wasn't a business trip. This was personal. The syndicate had made it clear that they were willing to destroy everything Musk had built. His empire, his family, his dreams for the future. And Musk wasn't about to let them win. Gwynn interrupted his thoughts, her voice a quiet whisper. "You okay?" Musk looked over at her, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Just thinking." "You're thinking about how they always seem to be one step ahead, aren't you?" Gwynn asked. Musk chuckled softly. "That's always been the case. But that doesn't mean I won't keep trying." The jet touched down in New York City, and the team wasted no time getting into position. They moved in the shadows, blending into the night, taking their cues from the CIA operatives who knew how to navigate the city's backstreets without drawing attention. Their destination was an unassuming brownstone building located in the heart of Manhattan. On the surface, it was just another luxury apartment. But Musk knew better. This was a front, a hiding place for the upper echelons of the syndicate's operations. The team moved in swiftly, making their way to the building's rear entrance. Gwynn signaled to the agents in the front, and the door was opened silently. Musk's heart raced as they stepped into the dimly lit hallway. This was it, the moment where everything could either fall apart or come together. Inside the building, the air was thick with tension. The walls were covered in dark paintings and expensive furniture. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the man they had come to find, the shadowy figure pulling the strings behind the syndicate's ruthless actions. Gwynn led the team into the elevator, her eyes scanning the security footage from the building's cameras. The syndicate leader was just one floor above them, and every second felt like an eternity. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Musk's team moved swiftly down the hallway. The door to the penthouse was locked, but the CIA had tools to handle that. Within moments, the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. Inside, a dimly lit room stretched out before them. A massive desk was positioned against the far wall, and Musk's eyes immediately fixed on the figure seated behind it. The man wasn't surprised to see them. He had been expecting them. Well, the man said, his voice cold. "Elon Musk. I wondered when you'd show up." Musk didn't flinch. "You're the one pulling the strings, aren't you? The syndicate's leader?" The man leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "I'm just a part of the machine. But yes, I've been behind a few things. And now, you're here. What do you want, Musk?" "I want you to stop," Musk said, his voice steady. "Stop trying to destroy what I've built. Stop sabotaging SpaceX. You've made a mistake thinking you could control everything." The man's smirk faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "You think this is about you? This is bigger than just one company. It's about control, about reshaping the future. You're just a stepping stone." Musk took a step forward, his anger barely contained. "Not anymore. Your syndicate ends tonight." The tension in the room was almost palpable. Musk stood at the threshold of the syndicate's inner sanctum, staring down the man who had orchestrated countless operations designed to undermine everything Musk had worked for. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized that this confrontation wasn't just about stopping the syndicate. It was about proving that they couldn't control his future. The syndicate's leader, a tall man with dark, calculating eyes, studied Musk carefully. The room was dimly lit, with expensive art on the walls and sleek, modern furniture scattered throughout. It was a place designed to evoke power, wealth, and influence, the perfect hideaway for a man who had been pulling strings behind the scenes for far too long. "So, Musk," the man said, his voice like ice, "you really think you can stop me? You, a tech entrepreneur, are going to take down a global operation? Do you even understand what you're up against?" Musk didn't flinch. "I understand more than you think, and I'm not here for a lecture. I'm here to stop you." The leader's smile widened. "You have no idea what you're messing with. The syndicate isn't just a group of criminals. We're a network that stretches across every sector of the world. You're just one piece in a much larger game." Musk took a step forward, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I don't care about your network. You've made a lot of mistakes thinking you could mess with my company, my family, and my future. It ends tonight." For a moment, the leader said nothing. He seemed to consider Musk's words, as though weighing the cost of his next decision. Then, with a chilling calmness, he spoke. "You're right," the man said softly. "It does end tonight, but not in the way you think." The leader reached for something on the desk in front of him, a small, inconspicuous remote. He clicked a button, and suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding white light. Musk had barely enough time to react before the room went dark again. The security lights above flickered for a moment before plunging them into complete darkness. Gwen's voice crackled through Musk's earpiece. "What's happening? Elon, are you okay?" Musk gritted his teeth, trying to adjust his eyes to the sudden darkness. The sound of footsteps echoed around him, slow, deliberate steps. He knew they were being watched. "I'm fine," Musk muttered, his voice low. "Stay alert." The leader's voice came from the shadows. "This isn't just a fight for control over SpaceX, Elon. This is about something far bigger. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? The truth is, you're playing into our hands. Every move you make makes you more predictable, more vulnerable." Musk felt his heart race as a shiver of unease ran down his spine. The syndicate wasn't just a shadowy organization anymore. They had been anticipating Musk's every move, playing a game that had been set in motion long before he ever realized what was at stake. "You think I'm vulnerable?" Musk asked, his voice steady despite the rising fear. "You've been underestimating me from the start. I've seen your operations. I've seen the damage you can do. But I'm done playing defense. I'm coming after you, and I will make sure you never threaten anyone again." The leader let out a dark chuckle. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the one in control here. You think you can just disrupt our operations? That's cute. But this isn't just a matter of taking down a few satellites or companies. This is global. This is the future." The air grew even heavier as the leader's words sunk in. Musk knew that the stakes had been raised, but this was different. The syndicate was playing a far more dangerous game than anyone had anticipated. And in that moment, Musk realized he couldn't just beat them with technology, strategy, or raw ambition. He had to outthink them. He had to anticipate their next move. "I've got something you want," Musk said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Something that'll change everything. The very thing you've been after all along." The leader's tone shifted slightly. "And what's that, exactly?" Musk stepped closer to the desk, his presence filling the room with an undeniable confidence. "I know you've been after SpaceX's satellite data. The algorithms we're working on. Those are going to change the way the world works. If you take that data, you'll have power, but it won't be enough. You'll need more than just information. You'll need access. And that's where you've been blind." The leader's silence spoke volumes. He hadn't anticipated Musk to strike back so directly. "You want access to more than just my company. You want the future of space," Musk continued, his words growing more deliberate. "But here's the thing. The algorithms we're working on can't be stolen. They're not just data. They're the foundation of something that can't be replicated. Not by you, Not by anyone. The leader's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. You can't hide everything. Musk shook his head, a small, almost defiant grin forming on his face. I'm not bluffing. You think you can control the future, but the future isn't something you can predict or dominate. It's something that evolves. And that's where I have the advantage. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light again, blinding Musk for a moment. His vision cleared, and he saw the leader staring at him with an unreadable expression. I don't need to play this game anymore, Musk said, standing tall. You've lost. And when this is all over, the world will know who you really are. The leader's expression twisted into something between a sneer and a smile. You're too arrogant for your own good. But I'll tell you what, Musk, you've got guts. I'll give you that. I'll make you a deal. Musk frowned, his guard up. I don't make deals with people like you. You don't have a choice, the leader said, his voice dripping with cold confidence. Here's what I'm offering. You walk away. You go back to your little world of rockets and cars, and we let you live. No more games. No more sabotage. Just peace. But if you keep pushing, if you keep fighting us, you'll lose everything. I'll make sure of it. Musk's eyes burned with determination. I didn't come all this way to back down now. Your game is over. The leader laughed, a low, guttural sound. We'll see, won't we? Just remember, Musk, every decision you make now will lead you closer to the end. The tension in the room hung thick as Musk locked eyes with the syndicate's leader. The offer, the deal, lingered in the air like a poisonous cloud. Musk had heard it all before. Threats, intimidation, promises of safety in exchange for surrender. But this time, it felt different. This was no longer a battle over control. It was a battle for survival. The leader, his face a mask of cold calculation, stood up from his chair and walked around the desk, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the room. You don't get it, Musk, he said, his voice now tinged with something darker, almost paternal. You think you can outsmart me? Outmaneuver the syndicate? You're just a man. A brilliant one, yes, but still just a man. You'll be crushed. Musk remained silent, his mind racing. The offer was tempting. Walk away, live a peaceful life, and abandon the fight. But Musk had never been one to back down when faced with a challenge. Not in business, not in life, and certainly not now, when the stakes were higher than ever. No, Musk said firmly, his voice unwavering. I'm not backing down. You may think you control everything, but you're wrong. You can't predict what's coming next. The leader smiled, a twisted grin. Very well, Musk. If you insist on this path, then know this. You're playing with fire. And when it burns, it will burn everything you care about. Musk didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back. The battle for SpaceX, for his legacy, for the future, was about to reach its final, bloody confrontation. Gwyn's voice crackled through his earpiece. Elon, we've got company. They're on the move. We need to get out of here. Musk's heart skipped a beat. He had known it would come to this. The syndicate would fight back with everything they had. But the fact that they were already moving their forces and made it clear. The final showdown had begun. Where are they coming from? Musk asked, his voice steady, his mind racing through possibilities. Multiple directions, Gwyn replied. We've intercepted comms. They're surrounding the building, but we've got a clear exit plan. Just need you to stay focused. Musk turned to face the syndicate leader, his jaw clenched. I'm done talking. The leader's smile faded. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Musk's. You really think you can win? After everything I've built? After everything the syndicate has done? You're out of your depth, Musk. You'll never be able to keep up. Without warning, the doors to the penthouse slammed open. Musk instinctively reached for his weapon, his heart racing as armed men poured into the room, their guns aimed directly at him. The leader stepped back, his voice a low whisper. You've made your choice, Musk. Now, you will face the consequences. In that moment, Musk's entire body tensed. He was no longer just fighting for himself. This was about everyone who had ever believed in him. The people who had stood by his side, the vision of the future he was trying to create. The fight wasn't just for SpaceX, it was for the future itself. Get ready, Musk said, his voice calm, as he took a step back toward the wall, positioning himself for what was coming. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the building. The force of them sent everyone stumbling to the ground as debris rained down from above. Musk's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a fight now, it was war. Gwen's voice crackled again. The team's in position. We've got the back exit covered. Move now. Musk didn't hesitate. He shot a look at the syndicate leader, who was momentarily distracted by the chaos. Without another word, Musk darted for the exit, moving swiftly through the haze of smoke and rubble. As he sprinted down the hallway, his mind raced. He couldn't help but think of everything he stood to lose. The billions invested in SpaceX, the progress they had made in reaching Mars, the dreams of a better future. All of it was at risk. And yet, Musk's resolve only hardened with every step. He burst through the back door of the building, emerging into an alleyway where his team was waiting. Gwen, along with a few CIA operatives, was already moving toward a black SUV parked a few meters away. We've got to move fast, Gwen said, her eyes scanning the streets. They'll be coming for us, and they'll stop at nothing. Musk didn't need to be told twice. He leapt into the SUV, slamming the door shut as the engine roared to life. The vehicle sped off, weaving through the streets of New York at breakneck speed, the city's lights blurring around them. As the SUV tore through the city, Musk glanced over at Gwen, who was typing rapidly on her tablet. What's the status? We've got a secure route out of the city, but they're tracking us, Gwen said, her voice steady despite the chaos. We'll need to switch vehicles once we're outside the city limits. We'll make sure they don't catch up. Musk's mind was already racing ahead, thinking about their next move. They couldn't afford to get caught. Not now. Not when they were so close to taking down the syndicate for good. But as they reached the edge of the city, Musk's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his blood running cold as he read the message. It was a text from an unknown number, with a single line of text. This isn't over. You'll regret this, Musk. The syndicate never forgets. Musk's heart pounded in his chest. He had known it would be dangerous, but this was more than just a threat. It was a declaration of war. This is just the beginning, Musk muttered to himself. Gwen looked over at him, sensing the shift in his mood. We've got this. We'll take them down. Musk nodded, but deep down, he knew that the syndicate was far more dangerous than they had realized. The battle for the future was far from over. The adrenaline still surged through Musk's veins as the SUV roared through the night, leaving the chaos of the city behind. The message on his phone echoed in his mind like a constant, haunting reminder. The syndicate never forgets. The words weren't just a threat, they were a warning. One that Musk couldn't ignore, no matter how hard he tried. His thoughts raced faster than the vehicle, as the weight of everything that was on the line began to sink in. The syndicate had underestimated him once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. He knew they would be relentless. No matter where he went, no matter how far he ran, they would find him, and they would never stop until they had him. Musk looked out the window, the familiar sights of New York City gradually fading into the distance. It felt like the world was closing in around him, and yet, in the midst of it all, something inside him ignited. A fire that had always burned within him, but now it was fiercer than ever. Gwen's voice broke through the silence in the car. Elon, we've got a plan, but we need to move fast. The syndicate's already tracking our movements, and we're running out of time. Musk's grip tightened on the seat, his mind focusing solely on the task at hand. What's the plan? We need to go dark, she replied. We'll relocate to a secure facility outside the city, one that's off the grid. We'll regroup there and figure out our next move. Musk nodded, but he wasn't entirely convinced. The syndicate was resourceful, and the idea of going off the grid seemed like a temporary solution at best. He needed to hit them where it hurt, hard. They had already disrupted his operations, attempted to ruin his reputation, and brought his entire company to the edge of collapse. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Do you have anything on their next move? Musk asked, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing as the darkness of the night seemed to press in on him. Gwen tapped on her tablet, pulling up an encrypted map of their current location. We've intercepted a transmission. It's coming from one of their safe houses in the area. They're regrouping, preparing for something big. It's not just a counterattack, it's a full-scale operation. They want to make an example of you. Musk's jaw clenched. The syndicate had always operated in the shadows, pulling strings from behind the scenes, manipulating events to their advantage. But now, they had overstepped. Now, it was his turn to play the game. "I've got an idea," Musk said, his voice suddenly colder, more focused. "We take the fight to them." Gwyn raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting?" "Yes," Musk interrupted, his eyes flashing with determination. "We go straight to their safe house. We don't wait for them to come for us. We end it. Right here, right now." Gwyn hesitated for a moment, but the resolve in Musk's eyes was unmistakable. "I'll get the team on it. But this will be dangerous, Elon. We don't know exactly how many of them are there, or what kind of weapons they're holding." Musk met her gaze. "We've faced worse. We're not backing down now." The SUV sped up, cutting through the darkness, heading toward the safe house that would be the site of the final showdown. As they approached the outskirts of the city, Musk could feel the weight of the decision he had made. It wasn't just about protecting SpaceX anymore. It wasn't just about revenge. This was about taking back control of his destiny. The safe house was located on the edge of a remote industrial complex, hidden behind tall fences and barbed wire. Musk's team, a mix of highly trained operatives and tech specialists, had already begun to deploy, preparing for the assault. Gwyn handed Musk a small device, a piece of cutting-edge technology that would help them breach the facility's defenses. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was an edge of uncertainty in her eyes. Even she knew that they were about to step into the heart of the syndicate's operation. Musk nodded, his gaze hard. "Let's finish this." With the click of a button, the device emitted a signal that scrambled the facility's security system. Musk's team moved swiftly, sneaking through the perimeter and entering the compound unnoticed. The air was thick with anticipation as they advanced deeper into the heart of the syndicate's stronghold. They reached the inner chambers, secured rooms filled with surveillance equipment, servers, and what appeared to be a vast network of illegal operations. But it wasn't the data that Musk was after. It was the man who had orchestrated it all, the syndicate leader. The leader, however, wasn't in the compound's command center. Musk's instincts screamed that something was off. His gut told him that the leader had set a trap, but Musk wasn't going to turn back. He had come too far to be afraid. "We need to move quickly," Musk said, signaling his team to fan out. "Find him. Now." They moved through the corridors, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the syndicate's operations. The air was thick with tension, each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of movement, amplifying the feeling that they were being watched. Finally, they found him. The leader stood in front of a massive, reinforced door, clearly expecting them. "I knew you'd come, Musk," the leader said, his voice almost a whisper. "But you're too late." Musk's heart skipped a beat as the door slid open, revealing a room filled with armed syndicate agents. The battle for the future wasn't just a matter of business. It was life or death. "You can't win," the leader said, a cruel smile playing across his lips. But Musk wasn't listening. As his team charged into the room, taking down the syndicate's operatives one by one, he fixed his gaze on the leader. It was time to end this. "You underestimated me," Musk said, his voice cold with fury. "And that was your biggest mistake?" With a swift motion, Musk lunged at the leader, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "This is where your reign ends," Musk growled, his grip tightening. The leader struggled, but Musk's determination was unmatched. With a final, decisive move, Musk disarmed the leader, securing him in handcuffs. As the dust settled and the room grew eerily quiet, Musk looked around at the fallen syndicate agents. The battle was over. But it wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for everyone who had ever believed in his vision. A victory for the future of space exploration, for humanity, and for the fight against those who sought to control it. He had won. The syndicate was finished. Musk and his team have taken down the syndicate's leader and brought an end to their operations. But what do you think will happen next? Is this truly the end of the syndicate, or will another enemy emerge from the shadows? Let us know your thoughts.